Here we go. Dear Sat Shree, during meditation, I tend to disappear at times. It seems that this experience is connected with movement of prana around my sixth chakra. This happens only when I meditate on a reclining chair, and it seems to me that energy just gets stuck at this point. Hence, I disconnect from my embodiment. I wonder in how far one should be aware of samskaras being dissolved. Is it preferable to keep witness consciousness following the process of purification as prana moves through the body, or is it better to become unconscious, allowing the energy to do its work, or to let the samskaras be worked out by being associated, witnessing some story in the subtle dimension? Love Bodhi Das. Okay.
So I'm going to, Bodhi Das, great question. You covered a whole range of things. The thing that I want to cover is the last thing you said, is witnessing a bunch of things happening in the subtle plane while you're in that zoned out place, right? Where it's like dreams, but it's the subtle universes. In fact, they exist. There are whole domains, universes that have been created without a body. And they have principles that are going on. It's interesting, I was listening to a psychic healer that I refer people to sometimes, and she was saying that she was describing something in her own terms, in her own language, what I have been experiencing. And I realized, oh, that's why when I enter in those domains, and although very enchanting and very interesting, I come back and feel like nothing has happened. Because for them, nothing is happening. They're simply in the subtle mental or the subtle vital or the subtle psychic, and they're not grounded. They have not embodied. Therefore, there's no evolution. There's no process. There's processing, but there's no processing that has a conclusion, because that only happens in space and time. So, and you don't have space and time unless you're in a body. So it got real clear to me, because in my first awakening, I went into that place that I resided, which was infinite, unchanging physical space, literally the outer space, where I was viewing the galaxies unfolding in like time-lapse sequence, where I watched them form, I watched them move, and yet I was timeless, watching time from a vast distance. And I was so happy, so fulfilled, and it never left. It's still with me now. But nothing happens there. No evolution occurs there. Creation doesn't happen, so it's endless. But even within that endlessness, there is an inclination of the soul to be cast out or to be pulled to other universes. And so they play in these other domains. And they have drama and trauma and all the emotions and the feelings we human beings have, but they're not. They're all energetic. They're psychic events, and they don't have the kind of impact our emotions and our feelings have, because they're part of our biological embodiment. So there's this tanglement of false experience. That means experience that does not evolve. And this was part of both the manifestation of the original intent and also the consequences of it embodying, and then people passing away and carrying that into the subtle worlds. That's why I say human beings on this planet give a grounding for all the universes that exist, that when you're sitting in your samadhi and you're aware, you're watching and experiencing and sensing. Nothing happens in those domains. They're just events. They may or may not give you information about yourself. And if you're inclined, if you're psychically open or unwittingly open, you may pick up a few of them along the way, and suddenly you have a mood that you never knew you had. Your arm starts flapping instead of working like a normal arm. You start functioning in different ways without recognizing you've actually tapped into your psychic body, into something that you let in. So it's also true. But nothing evolves, and that's why when these beings come, they also go, because they can't land. And the fact that we have the body, we're the ultimate authority about who comes and who goes. We set the boundary. We're actually free of any outside of influence as long as we're fully grounded. But when we awake, we open up to these subtle story planes, and unwittingly we assign value and importance to them. And of course, those planes love it because they get our attention, and our attention has a power because we're in a body. And it draws these beings to us. So that's the menagerie of that subtle world that you go into. It does not matter. It is not directly relevant. It's interesting and entertaining. It gives information and gives perspective because you're traveling to different parts and zones. I remember when this first happened to me, I entered into a domain of beings that reside in the moon, the physical moon. Actually, I traveled in my subtle body to the physical moon, and there were these just beautiful gardens, Mediterranean-like places, and people were in the heavens living there. And I thought, how does that work? How can you have a physical moon and this? And this is the domain of like sattvic happiness. It is what the heavens are. And they're in the vicinity of the moon. There was just something that has them clustered. There's one in Earth. I know there's one in the middle of the Earth, and there's one in the sun. The moon children and the sun children. I know. I am answering questions.
Have you answered the question?
But I have one question, so I'm really going to milk it.
We'll be here a while.
So let me play here. And so I recognized, though, I carried with me a tremendous amount of power, and it enlivened that whole domain when I was there. And when I left, it went back to its ruminations and its dimness and its the small piece of power that's accessible to them only through their psychic bodies. So it was an introduction to those things. So when I heard this, and I recognized, oh, I see. We're the spiritual awakening people is a whole different set of problems because you're open to so much more than just the human psychological, and it gets mixed with your human psychological. So you have to ground. You have to know that you set the boundaries, that I'm the one here in a body, and this is interesting, I'll let you in for a while, and now you're not interesting anymore, go. No consequences, no obligation, no responsibility. But there are domains, by the way. It's all relative to how close to truth. These domains primarily exist in the near-Earth domains. These are the planes of consciousness near Earth. Once you get higher, then the true forces start becoming accessible. So this is that middle kingdom I speak of. So when you often go into samadhi states and you're relaxed enough and your body's relaxed, then your consciousness expands and starts penetrating into those domains. For most of you, especially you, Bodhidas, you don't have to worry about it because you're so damn embodied, nothing's going to get in. And, not that your consciousness has been fully embodied, but your body, personality is fully embodied, unless you let them, or it matches you in some way. And that's true for many of us, especially in the West. But this really setting the territory of our own, then you are free. And it sounds like, as you described it, your ability to witness it is available to you. For me, when I first entered it, I'd get lost in it. I would feel their emotions. I would think their thoughts. I would merge with the domain. That's the danger of the experiential awakening. You lose your boundary. And when you go into those domains, you empower it with your embodied consciousness, and they seem very tangible, very real. But when you start owning the space, they fade away into the shadows that they are, the echoes that they are, and they lose their power. So there's not much to beget from that. Now the exception is when the Sat Force comes. When the Sat Force comes, surrender to it. And the Sat Force can come as the intensity of truth consciousness, or come as the divine Shakti mother coming in. When these forces come in, they cross the middle, they pierce through the middle kingdoms, and they come directly from the highest state that you can receive into you, your body. And these you do want to open to. These you want to allow to have their time with you. Now I know that when this happens, when these huge, strong descents happen, you may enter temporarily into these middle kingdoms before, during, or after. And all of that is fine as long as the current is being experienced by the body. If there's a movement, because then you're letting this is the exclusive self-opening of the Mother Book, to be open to the divine grace when it comes, and then to do nothing but let her do her work in your body, in the cells, in your nervous system. Sit as long as you can, at first especially, to let her have her way. And what I noticed is it started taking away my life. It started dissolving on its own course the samskaras that had organized me. So that's the other answer to your questions. We can't solve our samskara karmas from the consciousness that is the product of them. We can only resolve them when we are able to access greater forces. And they come in as a tangible sense, either in your awareness and into your experience. So a lot of you, when you first experience, for example, the Sat Force, you feel the pressure on your head or on your shoulders. But if it goes deeper, then your body seems to it stops moving. It becomes still. And it becomes, at some point, immobile when it fully manifests in you. And you're conscious, and you're feeling the force. And your body, you don't know how to move your body, because in fact, consciousness is kind of like to one side, isn't in the body giving commands. So, but you have to descend back into your body, and then you can begin to move your body. That's a sign that the Sat Force is there, that it's doing its work, and you don't want to move. You want to sit silent and still and let it do its work. Be damned the world, phone calls, deadlines, be damned, all be damned. Be with that. When that comes, at first especially, that's what you want to give permission to. There comes a time when it starts backing away because it didn't work, or it went as far as it could at that one time. And then it's important that you come back out of it, that you reclaim the territory, because you'll be quite vulnerable when the big force starts withdrawing, and your consciousness then starts returning to your normal self, because your samskaras will put you into the various planes of the subtle world that are still being worked out, that were being displaced by this injection of truth consciousness. So those you could be vulnerable to. They would only become a problem is if you made that impression real by acting on it or believing it or deciding that is the truth I want to follow. That's the only time you could make a problem with it, is when you make it real. Then there is also the Shakti Force, when it comes in. And of course, in my experience, I wouldn't even imagine saying no when the Shakti Force comes in. You know? It pretty much captivates you and draws you, and it's like I said, it is the addiction of all addictions. That you're just waiting for it to come again, and when it comes, you just want to stay in that state. That was my experience of it. And of course, it too stripped away my life. It too, I lost interest in things, and too, I was then living for the divine. It was like a natural unfolding. In the awareness, it's less seductive. It's harder, it's harsher, it's more truth consciousness, and therefore, it's harder to be with. It's extremely uncomfortable because you're having surgery without anesthesia. If there's experiential components there, then you can be with it more easily. So what is it relevant for you in terms of this? It's again the same conversation I had at the start. When you give yourself over to a higher power, then everything that's happening to you serves. It will dissolve the samskaras, if you will learn to recognize that they're there. So you need sufficient truth consciousness to see it. And Bodhisattva, you know your samskaras. They're like your testament. It's the Bible. You know, this is that issue, and this is that issue. I want to do it myself, and I'm afraid of this, and I'm vulnerable here, and I'm angry here, and you got it down. You don't need to know any more than that. How about we burn the book? Right? Just burn the book. Fuck it. Fuck the whole thing. Just show up, be loving. Like I said, the secret to this is an embodiment, the expression of truth when you're in the body is love. Just love, serve others so they can love, empower others to know their own truth. And it'll all fade away. And yeah, they'll be there, but they're just going to be echoes, shadows that don't evolve, that don't matter.